Hey guys, it's Kim, and I'm back with a second battle report. For this battle report, it'll be 600 points. I'll be showcasing the Moria army, in which I did the list building and tactics video, and I'll be playing against my friend Jack. He'll be taking a Force of Mordor, and we will be playing on our new table with the new terrain. A side note, I wanted to introduce a cheaper way for terrain for people getting into the hobby. You could buy the Osgiliath kits and the Rohan house kits, but as someone getting into the hobby, it's very expensive. And so for this battle report, I'm showing that paying about $80 at PetSmart, using about 5 cheap paints and a box of grass tufts, you can make your own terrain. Now, you can't really walk into them, but they do provide a good line of sight blocking and just add atmosphere to the table. So sit back and enjoy. So here is the top view of the table we will be playing on today. As you guys can see, it's pretty standard. We tried to make it even. Here's a side note. The middle and the top right piece of terrain, those two do have openings on both sides, so models can walk in and out, so just be aware of that. And the rest of the terrain, they're simply there for line of sight blocking. So my army list is the same one I discussed in the last video on tactics, but I'll go over again. It is led by Durbers, who is the army general. In the warband is a cave troll with a hammer, a warg marauder, a bat swarm, a regular goblin drum, 5 goblins with shields, 3 with spear, and 2 goblin archers. Then we have the black shield shaman leading 3 shield goblins and 3 regular spear goblins. Then a regular shaman with 3 shield goblins and 3 spear goblins. And the last warband is a goblin captain armed with a shield. He's leading 5 goblins with shields, 2 with spears, and lastly the second warg marauder. So this army is exactly 600 points. So Jack's army was led by the Witch King. I forgot what his stats were, but he had about 16 will, 3 might, and maybe a single fate. He was leading 10 Moranan orcs, armed with what you see. Then we had Gothmog mounted on the warg with a shield. He was leading 11 Moranan orcs, 1 had a banner. And the last warband was Zagdouche, and he was just leading 4 Moranan orcs. So the total body count was 28. So the mission we played today was capture and control. If you follow the arrows on the screen, you'll see where all 5 objectives were placed. The middle one was underneath the rock that you could walk under, so just keep that in mind while you guys watch the battle report. Here's the deployment, and to be expected, the bulk of both our armies were deployed on the center line. There was definitely a focus towards the left side of the board, where Jack put both Gothmog and Zagdouche, while keeping the Witch King still in the center. So in response, I castled up a bit as well on the left side. I was hoping to catch out Zagdouche's small warband and crush it. And here is the top-down view of both our deployments. Turn 1, Jack gets priority. So in response, I do call a heroic resolve on Durbers. So I do this because knowing Jack had priority, I knew the Witch King would try to either sap the will from my black shield shaman, or my regular shaman, or transfix my troll, or compel one of my goblin drummers. I didn't know. All I knew was he had a lot of options with his magic. So to counter and give my goblins a small chance, I called the resolve. And Jack decides to transfix my cave troll. And this was probably the highlight of the game. He decided to roll just 1 dice on the transfix and managed to roll not 1, but 2 ones with his reroll from the crown. It was probably the saddest display of magic I've ever seen playing this game. So he decides to hold the Witch King back after that pitiful magic phase, and proceeds to move up his whole orc line, trying to grab as many goblins as he can, Zach Douche decides to go after my captain on the far left flank, and surprisingly Gothmog decides to charge directly into my goblin line. And due to not transfixing the cave troll, Jack decides to send a single Moran orc and manages to pass his courage, rolling at 8, and ties down my cave troll. So during Jack's whole movement, I was a bit nervous due to the Moran orcs coming into combat with my goblins. Being strength 4 and a defense of 6, even if I did win combats, I'm fishing for 6 just to kill the orc, while he needs 5s or even 4s, depending on if it's a shield or a spear goblin. So I had to play a bit more cautiously than I would like to. My movement phase was pretty straightforward. I moved the bottom goblins a bit closer towards the right objective, set my Marauder and the rest of my goblins to support their friends, especially on the left flank against Zach Douche. And Jack made a mistake where he forgot that the bat swarm flies. It's been a while since he last played, and he forgot to wrap Gothmog. So we both talked, I saw the opportunity, but in the end, I decided not to charge Gothmog and be patient. I did this because realistically, Gothmog had 4 dice on the charge. He had the banner reroll, and all he needed essentially was a 5. He could mount it up to a 6, and in my mind, it wasn't worth losing a bat swarm for a single point of might. And I'd rather Gothmog kill a goblin or 2 than kill the bat swarm. So advice to new Moria players, be patient with your bat swarm, don't immediately jump on a target that may seem good, think for the long game, don't think short term. And then this is where my Black Shield Shaman shattered his banner. I was debating between shattering Gothmog's weapon, the Witch King's crown, or the banner. In the end, I prioritized the banner. I wanted to be the only one throughout the whole game having the banner reroll. And I did not record my shooting phase, since both goblins hit orc, but none of them wounded. So onto the combat phase. Only Gothmog calls a heroic combat, and of course Gothmog easily wins his combat and decides to try to get a head start in breaking me since I do outnumber him. There was a slight debate whether he should charge my War Marauder down by the left flank, but Jack decided not to risk taking a courage test and just went further into my goblin wall in the center. However, in his second combat, Gothmog rolled horribly, and miraculously, I won the combat. Don't forget, Jack doesn't have the banner reroll because I did shatter it. And so I decided to put all 3 attacks into his warg because I would need 6s to wound him and 5s to wound the warg, and I really wanted him dismounted. But I could not roll a 5 for my life. I think I rolled a 1, 2, and a 3. Now looking towards the far left flank, my goblins were very fortunate, and we managed to win a lot of the combats, though I couldn't kill the Moranans, which is expected, needing 6s. The Marauder easily wins his combat and kills the orc in his combat. I'm really lucky, again, with these one-on-ones, simply because every time Jack would win with his orcs, they would potentially just kill a goblin outright, especially the spear supports. He just needs 4s. Now onto the captain versus Zagdouche combat. Was way better than I hoped for. He, with his 3 attacks, only wounded me once, and I managed to fade it. So that was a very lucky break for me. Now towards the center line, I shielded with most of my goblins, especially the 2 on the objectives, because I wanted to keep it in my possession. Again, very lucky. I did win a lot of the fights in the middle. It could have been a massive swing if I lost the fights, just due to how fast the Branded Orcs can chew and kill through my goblins. Unfortunately though, my second Warg Marauder lost his combat, equaling the fight. We rolled off, and Jack broke the tie, and Jack then decided to not kill the Warg, but kill the Shield Goblin first, and he did. So now one of the Marauders only had 2 Goblin Archers, and he would lose one of his attacks in the following turns. And onto the Troll fight. The Troll easily won the fight, and during the time I decided to just kill the Orc. Looking at my positioning and where his characters were, I couldn't really see a good opportunity to hurl that would have any meaningful effect, or even barge. I could have maybe barged into more Orcs, maybe 2 more, but I didn't want to risk doing that, not rolling high enough, or I get into the next combat, he wins the fight, and he manages to wound my Cave Troll. Because all he does need to wound is a 5, because they're strength 4 to d6. Yep, so I just simply killed Branded Orc, and that was the first combat phase. Quite happy with the outcome. It could have been much worse. I got off pretty lucky. Turn 2, the Moria gets priority. Once again, I decide to call a Heroic Resolve with Durbers. Once again, I'm doing this to ensure I have some sort of protection against the Witch King. And Jack decides not to call any heroic moves. I guess he was comfortable with his positioning, since, to be honest, nothing changed much from the first turn. Both our lines are still pretty much strong and intact. Minus the left flank where everyone's engaged. Once again, I decide to push up my Cave Troll and Warg Marauder towards the Morannon wall. My goal during the time was to have the Cave Troll to get enough attention and kill enough bodies to create a little hole for the Warg Marauder to run out, dismount the 3 goblins on the objective, and then call it a day for there. And this was where I was quite happy with the positioning. My Black Shield Shaman moves up and decides to shatter the Witch King's crown, or attempts to, and I roll a 5. There was a minute or 2 I was debating whether to use my only might to make it a 6, forcing Jack to pay more will, but I thought having another turn of shatter and having that extra might be useful than pushing up from a 5 to a 6. And this is where Jack was debating how many dice to counter it. In the end, he decides to roll 2, and he rolls 2 5s, thus saving his crown. Though I was pleased because the Witch King only has 13 will left. As long as he can't be doing his own stuff, I was satisfied. Towards the left flank, my captain decides to re-engage Zagdouche. I saw a great trap, which with the Moria army bonus would make me fight 4, which would be equal to Zagdouche's fight. I really thought this was the turn and chance to either force Jack to use a lot of his might from Zagdouche, or I could potentially just kill him outright. because I believe I would have 10 dice to wound him if I won the fight. So on to Jack's turn 2. He decides to pull the Bat Swarm off of Gothmog, and pretty much he just moves a few of the spear supports in the center line to help out his other orcs. Pretty much in the center, every model is engaged at this point. Then Jack decides on his right flank, rather than come towards me, he simply moved, I believe, 2 or 1 of the orcs to the middle objective, and decided for the other 3 to 4 Morannons to stay put where they were. He wanted me to come to him, which I thought was a smart decision. Basically, we had small portions of our armies just looking at each other. We were both in charge range. It was just pretty much waiting for the other person to make the first move. Then onto the Witch King. He decides to transfix the Cave Troll, and Jack just uses 1 dice and manages to roll a 6. With my heroic resolve called earlier, I could at least attempt to resist it, and I was pretty happy, though needing a 6 seemed a bit unrealistic, and I managed to roll only a 3. Therefore, my Cave Troll was indeed transfixed. One error, though, Jack had was he activated the Witch King before moving one of the Morannon orcs who was 2 inches or 1 inch away from the Cave Troll. Now, Jack could still fit into the base contact with the Cave Troll. However, due to the Morannon orc's positioning, he couldn't trap the Cave Troll, which he wanted. It wasn't bad, it still worked out, but with a little bit better positioning, he could have got a more optimal position. So onto the combat phase. We start with the Captain versus Zagdouche fight. Jack rolls a 6, setting the bar quite high, and even with 5 dice, I only roll a high of a 5. He forces me then to burn a might from my Captain, and we tie fight value due to the Moria army bonus, and we let fate decide, and of course it ends up going Jack's way again. Thankfully though, Jack with his 3 attacks doesn't manage to land a single wound on my Captain. My goblins on the left flank are continuing to win their fights amazingly, though can't finish off the Morannons due to their high defensive 6. But the War Marauder once again easily kills the orc he was in combat with, so the left flank is looking pretty good for me. I'm not taking many casualties, but I am reducing it, Jack's forces 1 by 1, which is the total opposite of the center line now. Jack starts to win some fights and is starting to kill my goblins at a pretty decent rate. We start with Gothmog's fight. This was the only fight that pretty much I won and of any significance. We, with the 6 goblins, won the fight. Jack only rolled, I believe, a high of a 4. Thus, he had to burn his last 2 mites to win. He didn't want to risk the fight since he was trapped and I would have 12 dice with all my goblins, needing 6s to wound. He just didn't like the odds, so he burned the might. He ends up putting a big hole in the goblin wall. I believe he killed 2 or all 3 of the goblins in combat with him. As we continued down the line, the only other combat where I believe I won was a Bat Swarm, who kills an orc. And at this point, I was losing a lot of the fights, and kind of realized if this trend continued for another turn or 2, my drum would be exposed, my characters would be surrounded and dead, and I think that would be game. So I have a single Goblin Archer on the top of the warg, because my Warg Marauder once again loses the fight, just to, I think, a single Morannon. And now I'm thinking my 3rd hardest hitting unit is reduced to garbage. And the last combat is the Troll versus Witch King. I forgot to mention the Witch King did call a heroic strike at the beginning of the combat phase, but amazingly only rolled a 1, so the Cave Troll and the Witch King we're tied fight. But once again, Jack sets the bar really high and rolls a 6, while my cave troll only manages to roll a 5, not even having an epic duel off. So Jack won the fight and does a single boon from the Witch King and a single boon from the Mirandans, and he considered should he use the might, and after about a minute of thinking, he did burn another point of might to boost one of his dice to land the killing blow on the cave troll. At this point, the Witch King only has 1 might left, and at the end of turn 2, here is a table, a lot of actions happening, a lot of resources as might is diminishing, and for me, I was in a very tricky position because I lost my cave troll, I pretty much lost my warg marauder, my bat swarm was in a pretty bad position. He could end up being trapped and dead. So I was really hoping or praying that I would get priority. If not, I think this would be the beginning of the end for the goblins. So on to the next turn. I won again the priority, and Jack decides to save the Witch King's last might and not call a heroic move. So with this, I have liberty to do what I want. I charge my Marauder into the Witch King, ensuring no more matching happens. I then decide to use my Black Shield Shaman's last point of will to shatter the Witch King's crown one last time. I roll a 3 and decide not to use might to make it a 4. I was slightly worried that if I did that, I would be wasting it, and I could potentially use this might for a heroic move later in the game. And crazily enough, Jack only uses a single point of will, and I was laughing my ass off. He rolls a 2 not once, but twice, and he has to burn his last point of might to save his damn crown. For me, it was totally worth it, though looking back, if I had just made it a 4, then he couldn't might it and the crown would be gone. But at the same time, he did use his last might while I saved mine. So at this point of the game, Jack only has might on Zagdouche, which kind of forges my plan along the way. I continue to move my goblins, trying to grab as many orcs as possible, to stop them from overflowing, surrounding, and attacking my drum. I managed to get Durbers and 3 goblins and the bat swarm onto Gothmog, hoping to at this point kill him. He's been tanking too many attacks, and I'm worried that if I don't deal with him now, he'll end up potentially killing Durbers. Because of Durbers, I have only 1 might left. I've been using them for the heroic resolves. I wouldn't have enough for calling defense for more than a turn. Onto the left flank again. I did forget to mention Jack did call a heroic move of Zagdouche, and he decides to square up with my captain one last time. There was some discussion as to whether he should charge my Marauder, but Jack was worried about failing the courage test and just decides to tag the goblins. His new plan was to break me and in a way ignore my fast-moving cavalry, and I thought it was interesting that he had left me the liberty and just flexibility to where I wanted to put the Marauder. And as we move down the right flank, I finally decided to move my goblins up because I'm noticing my center line is collapsing, and if these 6 goblins continue to do nothing, they're a waste of 30 points. I might as well try to grab the far right objective. It's only defended by 5 other orcs, so might as well tie them down before it's too late. And looking back to the left flank, this is where my plan came into fruition from the beginning. I decided to move my Marauder into Zagdouche. My thought was with a Marauder charging, my captain, and a spear support, with Zagdouche trapped, it should be enough to kill him. Thus, Jack would have no more might in the entire game. So onto the combat phase. Jack decides this is the time to call the time of the orcs, and I thought it was the perfect opportunity. There were so many combats, and I was like, at this point I might lose my whole army to this onslaught. So we start with Zagdouche versus my Warg Marauder and Captain fight. Once again, Jack is like God at rolling 6s for this guy. I also rolled a 6, but again, he's a god. He wins the tie and ends up killing all 3 goblins on top of the warg. Due to time of the orc to reroll all of his to wound dice. Thankfully though, the warg managed to stay, so at least he provides me a source of mobility. So on this flanks, I would say my goblins are doing decent, but not amazing. Like, they're not dying, besides the Warg Marauder. Then onto Gothmog's fight, which was pretty one-sided. Since I had the Bat Swarm in the combat, and he's trapped, Durbers immediately becomes fight 5, due to the army bonus. And with no might left, Durbers outfights Gothmog. So being trapped, I obviously won. I rolled the 6, having the drum reroll. And with 14 dice, I only managed to kill his warg, which blew my mind. I thought he would be dead. Though at least he rolled a 1 for his Throne Rider and is knocked down, or on his ass. The goblins in the middle, as you guys can see, are still holding the objectives and are managing to survive the onslaught for a bit. But again, he did break a hole in the wall closest to the middle. So my goblin drum is slightly exposed, which is why I started moving my archers and the other shield goblins around to fill the gaps. The Witch King fight against my Warg Marauder was pretty good, with no banner reroll and no might. I believe Jack rolled a 1 and a 2, and maybe another like 3. It was pretty low. I won the fight, and I managed to dismount the Witch King. So even with not the best combat phase, I'm pretty happy that both of his characters are now dismounted. So he lost a source of mobility, which is a win in my book. On to the next turn, I again won priority. Pretty grateful I did. I once again charged the Witch King with the Warg Marauder, hoping this would be enough to kill him. This was probably my only chance to do so. I start to move up my small reinforcements that came around that little hill terrain to tie up the wave of Morannon orcs. I was worried, or I was trying to mitigate being surrounded, especially by my characters. They would definitely die to 3 to 4 Morannon orcs. I tried to maximize all my movements once again to try to trap Gothmog. I think I slightly tunnel visioned a bit just because Gothmog was really getting on my nerves. He lived way too long for my liking. And Jack's movement was pretty quick too. He only had about 5 orcs to move because everyone else was tied up in combat. Back into the combat phase. The Gothmog combat was the first one we chose, and once again I was really hoping for him to die, because at this point this man has shrugged off the whole game of this combat. The guy won't die. I don't understand. He's like, I don't know how he's so tanky. He's just a regular orc, I feel like, half the time. But once again, I believe I only got a wound off of Durbers and a wound off the Bat Swarm. And I probably spent a minute talking to Jack if I should spend Durbers' last might to make a 5 I rolled to a 6. Just to get 3 wounds on Gothmog, hoping to remove him. And I was just thinking, using the might, he still has a fate, and if he fates it, I'm out of might, and he's still alive. And after a minute of talking and thinking about it, I decided to burn the might to do so. And of course, Jack passes fate, leaving Gothmog still with a single wound. At this point, I was feeling a bit bad, because I felt like I did waste the might. I should have kept it. I still had a might on the regular shaman. but I feel like Derber's might was more important because he has access to better heroic actions. And as you guys can see, most of the fights in the center didn't result in many deaths. In fact, I believe this whole round, not many models died. Me and Jack just couldn't roll to kill anyone. Though my favorite combat occurred during this turn. Under the piece of terrain in the middle was my Black Shield Shaman fighting the Brandon Orc in a cave. I managed to win the combat, but again, could not kill him. And the right flank finally had some action, but once again, no one died. And here is a top overview of the battlefield. As you can see, the center is still going strong. The left flank is diminishing quite a bit. I believe Jack has an advantage there. And the right flank has finally seen combat after this whole game, resulting in 1 goblin death. It's still anyone's game on that flank. I didn't get footage of the movement phase for this turn, but it was pretty straightforward. The biggest one would be where I positioned my models onto Gothmog, which you'll see on the screen, which is the combat phase. I managed to get 6 goblins, 1 being the shaman, 1 Derbers, and a bat swarm onto Gothmog. And it was this turn I decided there's no way Gothmog will live. He has 1 moon left, no fate, no might. I have 6 goblins and a bat swarm, and he's trapped. I'm going to roll a single 6 somehow. And so I used the shaman's last might, or his only might, to call a combat. And thank goodness, we finally killed Gothmog. And I managed, with the heroic combat, to get my bat swarm to touch Jack's objective in his backfield, which was huge. And the other 3 goblins just moved up to help their other little goblin friends in nearby fights. I was trying to tip the favor back in the center line. And at this point, I would say with the death of Gothmog and the heroic combat and helping a few more goblins get some kills, the tide definitely shifted into my favor in the center of the battlefield. Though I would say to the left flank, since Zagdouche still has quite a bit of might, Jack owns that part of the board. And on the right flank, I would venture to say Jack still owns it. So me winning the middle gave me a huge advantage to potentially either help those 2 flanks or just try to hold 3 objectives and let the other 2 go to him. Yeah, it's all good. So Jack, we're on turn, I think 6 now, or turn 7.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about the game right now?
Honestly, I am really not sure yet. I've had some lucky rolls go my way. That turn, not so much. What do I got? Oh man, you got all 5 points. So frankly, I feel quite bored.
Well, I don't have the
Oh, not
the
this
furthest
one yet over here yet. It's contested over there. I think I'm really relying on my heroes to carry the day here.
Okay.
But Zagdouche is a bit opposition. The Witch King, it's been a mixed bag. I need to take a will point away.
Okay. At this point in the game, do you think up to this point in the game that everything has been going your way, or do you think you could have done something slightly better for the mid game?
I think I could have had some better tactics with Gothmog, that's for sure, because I definitely forgot kind of about the bat and his ability to just fly over and really mess stuff up, but I definitely got some lucky rolls with him, so I'd say it's actually kind of a mix.
So Jack gets priority the next turn and moves Zagdouche into the center. He finally decided that he had enough of the far left flank and that Zagdouche would be more useful in at this point killing the goblins rather than continue fighting the goblin captain. Basically this turn, both Jack and I were aiming to break one another. Since the objectives are swinging with me in my favor, I had 3 out of the 5. So he was banking on getting a third one and letting the game end as soon as possible. I was trying to do the same, but not with me breaking. I wanted to maximize the points I would get, so I tried to break him without letting myself get broken. I knew that if the game continued any longer, I wouldn't be able to handle the Witch King nor the Morannons. Since at this point I lost all 3 hard-hitting units, the bat in one bad positioning could die to the Morannons quite easily. And especially during this turn, when I saw Zagdouche leave my captain and head straight for the center, that added some extra tactical decisions I had to make, because during that time I had nothing to handle Zagdouche with. I was worried that he would go and fight Durbers, because Durbers no longer had any might to call a strike nor defense. And onto the combat, this completely just changed what I said. The Dice Gods came back, and I managed to start killing the Morannons faster than Jack could kill me. In fact, I broke Jack during this turn. It changed my perspective completely and my plans, since I was expecting to be the ones taking the losses during this combat phase. And I believe at the end of the turn, Jack only had 10 models left on the table, and I still wasn't broken yet, so it was truly amazing that that happened. And I think at this point, we both knew the game was definitely in my favor. Jack was still in the game, but it was getting much harder for him to come back at this point. And so, for this montage of the combat phase, I just wanted to discuss a little bit about the 600 point Moria army that I ran today. I hope you guys find this battle report useful for seeing how this beginner army slash flavorful Moria army actually performs on the tabletop. As you guys can see from watching the battle report so far, it has a very diverse range of units that allows you to tinker in all the different aspects of the game. And in this game's case, you have answers to magic, some combat-esque heroes. So I hope if anyone's starting Moria, they get a lot of good perspective and some tips and knowledge from watching this battle report. The turn where Jack is broken. I am not broken, so no courage yet is needed. But due to my Fury Jack, did you take your will off from last combat or no?
No.
Okay.
That was 6.
Okay, a goblin will tag the Witch King because he's Fury Bubble. We're gonna.
Yeah, that was a problem.
We're gonna just do this.
Stupid
We're
Fury.
gonna put 2.
Oh, I should have used my Why didn't I cast a spell? Turn off his magic and then charge in.
I'm gonna bank him on running away, so I'm gonna mad dash for my own objective, and then
Isn't bad. We're gonna win right here.
I don't think so. So I'm gonna bank on him fleeing too. So I'm gonna
I
start
need roll 9s. No, 8s.
Tag him. Bat Swarm Zagdouche. Keep the Fury guy here. King in there. Goblin back here. And again, the mad dash. We have my 3 goblins are free. My warg is free. He pretty much only has this middle contingent left.
They all ran away.
So this was essentially the last combat, where Zagdouche will die. He had a Bat Swarm and Durbers on him, and we rolled the 6, of course. He was trapped. I think Durbers rolled a 5, 6, and a 5, and alone killed Zagdouche. And at this point, I think Jack only, after all the combat happens, after everything's said and done, I believe Jack only had 6 or 7 models left, and I happened to roll the 1, and so the game ended with me having, I believe, 1, 2, 3, I had 4 of the objectives in my possession. I had broken Jack, my army wasn't broken, so the only points I did not get was from the 5th far right objective, and I did not wound his leader, because if I had wounded his leader, I would have killed the Witch King. Game review, Jack, so just tell us what happened, how'd the game go, and all that stuff.
Yeah, man, it was real close right up to that last bit. Frankly, I had some mispositioned units outside I couldn't use the courage bubble from my heroes to save them, so I lost like 4 or 5 orcs right there after I broke, and that's what eliminated these spaces. Otherwise, I think I needed to kind of think about what you got. You gotta actually have a lot going on over there with the mobile units that got archers, you got the shatters, which I actually think the shatter I defended pretty well.
You did.
Just by having you stop the queen. You're trying to get rid of the crown.
Yeah.
I never touched your drum once, which I think I regret. And I think really, I also regret charging Gothmog in too early. I really wanted to just punch that hole through, but when you could fly over the top of me, that really interrupted that plan. So really, that alone really made it interesting. And then I had some good dice rolls that really helped me out. What do you think, Young? Alright, Young. Let's hear your final review of the round here.
The game was fun. I think having all the extra terrain definitely helped. That middle one, where the mid objective was, having that little gap to walk in and out added a lot more strategic value to the mid game, where I had to use one of my characters to camp the middle and defend. The list itself, Jack's list, I told him going in I was taking a average 600 point meant for beginners. His Mordor list was, to be honest, very unusual. He had the Witch King, Gothmog, and Zagdouche, and about 25 Morannon orcs. So I expected going in to have a very hard game, which it was. I lost the cave troll very early in the game. One more Marauder almost just died completely. And I'm just lucky that we had more. The body count helped a lot. Without it, I think Jack would have easily crushed my army, because I think at one point it was 15 dead goblins to 5 or 6 dead orcs. Unfortunately, the last 2 turns swung in my favor, where we just butchered all these orcs. And then killing Gothmog honestly helped a lot in this game, and having the Fury Bubble consistently tie down the Witch King. Overall, the game was great. I think me and Jack from now on will do 600 point games, because they do require, or they're shorter, they feel more strategic, and they're faster paced. So yeah. There you guys have it. I hope you guys enjoyed the battle report. It was a thoroughly enjoyable game. Let us know how the format is. I'm still tinkering with it. I'm getting used to the editing software, but still a work in progress. More to come. I believe this weekend I'm going to record 2 more battle reports, and we'll have a lot more tactic videos coming, and of course the painting. Side note on the painting videos, it may take a bit longer. School or semester is starting again, so I'll be focusing more on tactics, but when I have the free time, I'll definitely be doing sculpting and then painting, especially for the armor for my goblins. Till then, enjoy.